Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I would like to introduce to you two guys, two mics, and possibly the best sport podcasters in the world, Smack Talk with Smitty and Johnny. Are you not entertained?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Smack Talk with Smitty and Johnny. I'm Johnny,
And I'm Smitty.
and let's get right to it. We kicked it off with you guys. We kicked it off with you guys last week, and we're here. And let's transfer right into our first. Let's transfer right into our first topic. So, obviously, a big subject in college sports for the last 5-6 years it's been the transfer portal and the NIL and how those two have combined to pretty much change the landscape of college sports.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we just before we get into like the different aspects of it, Coach, just what do you think of transfer portal and NIL as a scope?
You know what, John? I really think that it just really changed everything that we looked at in college sports. Maybe I'm a person where I'm a little bit of old school, where it was like, when I was coming out of Jackson, Mississippi, man, it was like, you wanted a ride because, you could pay for your education. You could get a good quality education, and especially if you're coming from a household, man, that can't, afford that $80,000 to $100,000 bill, that was your goal. Your goal was that full ride scholarship, and it really wasn't quote unquote a money attached to that. It was more like the potential of you being able to graduate, and obviously if you had NFL aspirations and stuff, that would kind of set to the back burner. But at the end of the day, you were like, at least for my family, I know it was like you get to graduate with a degree. And now, that has kind of changed a little bit. Now, people are looking for the payday. People are not looking for just so much of the glory of getting a degree anymore. It's more of, how much can I get paid? And how much can my name, image, and likeness get me? And I know we'll get into it, and I'll get into really my deep views on it. But you know what? That's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from an old school perspective, and I'm more like, you know what, man? That's $100,000 scholarship that you're getting. Looking at the future, looking what that can get me in the future, and obviously, if I make it to the next level, that's just gravy. And gonna have some strong opinions as we lead into this topic, John, because I do have strong opinions. I do have strong opinions about this topic, just because college sports, our amateurism is kind of going to the wayside, man. I just see some major changes coming. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, I will say like definitely like with the whole with like so many guys like leaving for bigger deals and just I don't know, just like going to a different school every year. I feel like it definitely, like you say, to the amateurism thing is kind of out the window. I felt like amateurism was a little too strictly enforced back in the day. I think this was almost, I guess, if you wanted to boil it down to a simple word, you could call it almost like an overcorrection. I mean, back in the day, you couldn't even get a meal bought for you without it being an NCAA violation.
Right.
And now we've got this. But I wanted to get into something a lot of people might think would be a good thing with transfer portal and NIL, and that is the opportunities to rise the ranks. Like, okay, so you could like start off at a FCS school or for basketball a Division 1 like one of the smaller conferences or even a D2 or D3 and really like kind of work your way up. You shine for 1 year and then you get noticed that you've produced this well on the college level. You go to another school that's like a bigger brand, and then you could even go up to another school that's a bigger brand than that. So I feel like this does open up that opportunity for kids. Like, so say you got a kid who's a basketball player. He's not one of the top recruits. He's not even top 100 or anything like that. He ends up going. He's like a D1 talent, but he goes to like a UW Milwaukee or UW Green Bay or a school like that, plays really well his first year, he can just hit the portal, and then another school will be like a lot of the bigger schools will be a lot more willing to offer a kid like that because it's like, yes, it may be against smaller conference competition, but still this kid has shown that he can produce on the D1 level. So I think that it does create that opportunity, especially the transfer portal. And then with that, you go to a bigger school, you're able to get bigger NIL deals, and we'll get to that part later. But the thing is, to me, there is that opportunity to rise. So it's like you tell a kid, like he gets, like back in the day, back in the old school days, you tell a kid a kid gets a scholarship to UWM and UW Green Bay or wherever, which that's obviously not a bad thing. But
Not at
you're
all.
kind of yeah, but the thing is, like, your chances of like getting to the NBA, even if you shine there, aren't as good. I mean, yeah, you got the Damian Lillards and the Steph Currys who did play at Weber State and Davidson respectively, and
Hmm.
were so good that they still got noticed anyway. But it is harder to get that exposure at a school like that. But now with the portal, it's like you don't have to sit out a year, and you can kind of work your way up, and like I say, you play well at one school for a year, and then all of a sudden the big schools could be knocking down your door. So that's kind of a good aspect of it for me. So what do you think, Coach? Do you think it's that simple, or do you think it's like a little more nuanced than that?
You know what, John, man, that's a good question. Like I said, when I was coming up through my college years, it was like, I use my brother as a perfect example, man. I mean, you start off at junior college, you go to a Division One AA school, but then you only have two choices at that time. You either go down so you can go and play right away, or you go up and then you have to sit out a year. And I didn't think that that was fair even back then, too, because, it really limited the options for, like you said, being able to come up those ranks. It was funny while you were talking, it came to me about this young man that played for, I think it was Nova University. I'm not sure, but it was a university down in Florida. So this guy was a Division II school, and transfer portal really kind of changed his life and helped him out because, I mean, the guy came into that Division II school, really good ball handler, really good shooter, but he was only like 6'1", 6'2", right? Coming in. Literally, Johnny, by like his sophomore year, this Joker grew 4.5 inches.
Yep, that'll
He
happen.
plays for Penny Hardaway now over at Memphis. Like it was like he won a national championship with the Division II guys, and then boom, the guy was averaging like over 26 something points. And once again, it was that unique situation where, I mean, he played guard this whole entire time. So, you know what, when you get up to being 6'6", 6'7", you know what, he had already had those developed skills that was needed to be successful. So now he was more like LeBron James-ish with a point forward type of aspect with him because he never lost his handles. He always had his shot. It's just that he sprouted up 4.5 inches, on his way up. And now you have, a 6'6" guy that is 6'7" guy that is able to handle the ball, be able to pass like a guard, because those are all of the skills that he developed. And coming out of high school, he only had one actual money offer, and that was from the school, Division II school down in Florida. So, you know what? I do give credit, and that's a positive end of the transfer portal and opening it up. And not at once was I ever against like transferring, Johnny. It was the biggest thing for me was that how many times do you transfer? The reasons why you're transferring. Because I get it. I
Right.
really did like the rule that if my coach leave, then I should be able to leave too. Because that's only fair and that's business. I mean, let's be honest with each other. Most of us don't work for companies, man. We work for bosses. And when
Exactly.
you get that great relationship with that person that's coming into your house, that's promising you things that you really connect with and that you want to be with for 4 years, I totally understand being able to transfer because they are out. Now, some of the other reasons, I do, you know what, I'm kind of on the fence about, do they just give you one right away? And I get that. But now, man, you got jokers transferring 2 or 3 times because if the coaches leave, that's one. Then you get one in the bank to begin with, and then you can be a graduate student, and then you can transfer. Gone are the days. COVID is kind of winding down those COVID years. I think last year was like the last year of people burning that COVID year. But even getting hurt midway during the season can cap you a season, and then you can just transfer. You got guys that are in college for 6 and 7 years. So my thing is that rising through the ranks, yes, I think I did hear from a couple Division II schools, man, is that what they're becoming like the new junior college. They get to go
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yep.
They get an all conference. There was a kid from the the national champion runner-up Washington. He was at a Division II school in Minnesota. In Minnesota, he was at a Division II school, got All-American, got everything, and then you know what? Got picked up by Washington, and then the next year, you're playing at Division II. Now you're in the national championship game, playing for a national championship against Michigan. So it really gives those guys chances to develop, to get their self up through the ranks. But you know what? Tossing it back your way, John. At what cost?
Yeah.
At what cost, man?
Exactly. And the thing is like and also like you mentioned reasons too, like leaving one program for another, like just to seek NIL deals. See, that's the thing, like I'm like on the fence about, because it is kind of like, so it's like you got guys who are already playing at a big program, like Jordan Addison, who plays for the Vikings now, like he was at Pitt, but then Lincoln Riley takes over at USC. Caleb Williams, as you know, went with him, and then Jordan Addison, like we already heard, he was getting like a big NIL deal if he goes to play for USC, because obviously USC is a much bigger brand than Pitt. Pitt's a decent program, but USC, even though it hasn't really been what it was back in the late 2000s, it still is USC football. So there's that brand.
Still a
There's
bigger
the branding.
Still a bigger market. It's still a bigger market.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you look at some of the other guys who have like the guy who played for Wisconsin played basketball for Wisconsin last year, is playing for Kansas now. AJ Storr, he's at his seventh school in 7 years. So it's like, because as you know, like the NIL has gone down to high school level now. So it's like kids are transferring to high schools like 14, at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old to seek bigger deals. And it's just, at what point is it just like you say, at what cost? Like at what point, like, is there like any kind of aspect of team? Like what kind of commitment do these guys have to a team? That's always, I always thought that lost in all of this was, what are these guys' teammates' feelings about all this? I've never, like, I feel like that question has not been asked with a lot of this. Like, I feel like for me, that kind of started when guys sat out of bowl games, but now we're at a point where it's like guys are switching schools every year. Guys are going from team to team to team. Like you say, now that in the COVID year, I think NCAA's like, I don't know if they finalized that decision yet or not, but NCAA was just thinking about doing this period for athletes, just letting them have 5 years of eligibility. And that, as you say, doesn't include like, redshirt years, or like you said, like wasn't it junior college doesn't count towards
Yep.
eligibility now. So the thing for me is just like, it's so much of a free for all, and it's like so many guys, and like I'm all for seeking better opportunity, man. It's the American way. It is what it is. I mean, you seek the bigger NIL deals. You go to schools where you're going to get those. You get bigger brand exposure, all that. Like, I know that that's part of it, but at the same time, it is kind of, it has turned what was quite a structure back in the day, flawed and all. It was a flawed structure, of course, but it was more of a structure into what right now is kind of chaos.
No, John, you know what, man? I'm gonna step in here, man. I mean, that's what it becomes. I mean, it's like it went to two extremes. It went to the extremes where it was this extreme oversight. And now all of a sudden, Johnny, it goes to a point where there's little or no oversight. And, and I get, I just think that we're really kind of turning into the NFL, man. And we really don't, we're really not understanding that we are really turning into the NFL. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that NIL is serving what it was supposed to be serving. Because to me, it's like, is it really serving the needs? Because then you are still getting to the have and the have-nots. And that's what you're getting into. Quarterbacks are getting paid the big money. The receivers are getting paid the big money. You know what? We really don't hear about these big offensive lineman deals. And then, unlike the NFL, you're going off a high school tape with some of these guys. So some of these guys you are giving and $50,000 to off of high school's tape. And then you have some other players that are proving it. You got like the quarterback from Georgia. The man got almost like a $6 million deal. I mean, you get
to go to Miami.
To go to Miami, and yes, he did prove it, and yes, he did do what his job is. But once again, though, man, you know what? NIL was not supposed to be that. It's like, okay, I get it that now that you can pay athletes and now you can loosen up the rules, and which I am all for, that a person that gets a suit from his uncle shouldn't be banned for a whole year because he got a suit from his uncle that might know an agent or something, and that's a might. So, I don't think that should be happening, Johnny, but on the other extreme of things, I just think that it's becoming too much, because now who's the offensive lineman? I mean, who are those guys? Who are the guys that are at the end of the bench that are 53? NIL was made for like all of those guys are going to be on TV if they're a starter or not. And now it's kind of really turned into who's the hot commodity, man. You look at the Shadur Standers that gets paid more because of the TV time and the things that he get. You get the Travis Hunters of the world. You get the Carson Becks of the world because they're in marquee positions. But you know what? I really never really heard about like a defensive tackle or like defensive ends, or sometimes you don't even hear about those unsung guys. And I think that that's what NIL was kind of brought into, is that all those guys are getting paid. But now it's just really come down to is that if the colleges, it comes down to business decisions now. Now it's a business decision. Do I care about my offensive lineman that is the second string offensive lineman, which basically he still might not receive anything? Now, some of these big time colleges are getting in there where everybody kind of gets a base. So, they'll start off at like $1,000 or whatever. And these are just unfounded numbers that I'm throwing out. But either way, they get a base. And, I just think that it's very difficult, John, to try to police this now, because where does it end and where does it stop? I mean, it's been a drum that's been beating. These guys go over and over about, Carson Beck is making $6 million, man. He's going to probably make more than any rookie that is coming out this first year because of the new rules, obviously, the NFL put in place. So he's going to be making more than some of the NFL rookie quarterbacks. Like some of these rookie quarterbacks are going to be going in the third round. Carson Beck is making more than now. Ewers, if he would have stayed in, could have totally cashed in and went to a school and made somebody good. And that's what the colleges are saying. Gonna wind down here, man. Look at what Rick Pitino said. He just said it the other day. He said, you know what? We're not even gonna go, and we're going into the portal, man. We're not gonna NIL no recruit no high school kids right now. We're just gonna go right to the portal, dude. We're gonna go right to the portal. We're gonna get some ready-made players. He's like, who's gonna replace this guy? I'm not going to replace this guy with a high school kid. I'm not going to replace this guy with a high school kid. And then the NCAA is a little bit different because their stay is shorter. They only have to stay in a year. The college game benefits is that you at least have to have 3 years of college before you move on to the NFL. So at least the NCAA football benefits from that.
Yeah. So so we've covered a lot. So what is it? So when you all boil it down, do you miss the old system? Do you miss college sports without the portal on NIL?
You know what, John? I do appreciate the parity that I'm seeing in college. football now. I mean, it's like a double-edged sword, man. It's like I just think that regulations need to be in place. I'm not going to say that I miss the old system, but I do miss the morals that the old system brought. It's like it really just put more on amateurism. It put more on saying is that, you know what, my son can get a full ride education and not looking at the cashing in. And like I said, hey, like my boy Don King said, only in America. But at the end of the day, man, I say again, at what cost, John? I mean, at what cost? So I'm not going to say that I missed the old system, because I do think the old system was so somewhat dictatorshipness about this
Absolutely.
shadowy government of these NCAA people that we don't even know, making these
Hmm.
decisions and making these unempathetic decisions about these college athletes, man. Basically saying is that no, you should be lucky of what we're giving you, but yet you were benefiting off of them going on the field. These big deals that you were getting with these networks would not be remotely possible without these guys going out every week and every Friday. People like us and other sportscasters ain't got nothing to talk about if these guys are not going out there and being warriors. School bookstores, they're just the revenue that they're bringing into these schools are just crazy. And the coaching salaries, they wouldn't be getting coaching salaries the way that they are now without this. So I do think that there's just got to be striking of a balance. No, I do not miss the old system of what it held, but I do miss the old system for what it meant. if
Right.
if
That's
if
a good
if
point,
if
Coach.
if I'm trying to do right, I miss it from the philosophy standpoint of what it meant, and not so much of all of the intertwinings that was in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, on a lot of what you said, Coach. And see, for me, it is definitely like just seeing like a whole different group of kids at a school every year. Like, you especially notice this in basketball because there aren't as many guys on a roster. So there are some schools, like to Rick Pitino's point, that are going to hit the portal to replace players. And is we're not. And the thing is, you're not just worried about players who are declaring for the draft or who are graduating anymore. Now you're worried about who's going to enter the portal himself. Guys are having to, coaches are having to re-recruit their players every year. Like, coaches are, I feel like college coaches these days, football and basketball, are more like GMs. Like, they
Yep.
have to, and they're constantly having to convince their guys why they're in the right place. Whether we're talking about whether we're talking about football, basketball, doesn't matter what sport. The thing is, like, the thing is, the old system was archaic in the way that the amateurism caused almost like what a lot of people said was exploitation of athletes. I thought in a way it was, in a lot of ways it was, because yeah,
Agree.
these guys are getting a free education, but at the same time, especially the guys who are really good, they, I mean, Quinn Ewers just said in an interview that I didn't go to school to play school. I didn't go to play school. I went to play football. Like, and that is the, I mean, a lot of guys aren't going to say that publicly, but
No.
it's the mentality of a lot of these players. So because of that, I think it was a good way to, like, implementing transfer portal and NIL was a good way to kind of meet them halfway, if that makes sense. To, like, basically say, like, okay, you're getting a scholarship, but you can also seek these kinds of opportunities. You got more freedom to go wherever you choose. But at the same time, as you said, Coach, there needs to be some type of regulation in place, I feel, because right now it's just, like I say, it's just a free for all. It's chaos, and I don't know. Like, for me, it's just one of those things that, like, the old system was too flawed to just go back to, but there needs to be some principles of it put back into place so that guys aren't hopping from team to team every year, so that coaches can have at least a little bit of continuity. Some programs do it better than others. Some programs obviously are able to retain their players and do that kind of thing. So, but at the end of the day, I don't know how it can be regulated. I mean, the NCAA can, but because of the way it's gotten, I don't know how much power the NCAA or any other entity would really be able to regulate such things.
And
So
you know what, John?
it's
There's more questions than there are answers. Right now. I mean, just overall, man, there's just more questions than there are answers, and it's just interesting to me about how do you police it? How do you put things in place? Because this is not like the NFL, man, where you only have 32 teams. You have over 100 NCAA Division I schools, man. And now you're trying to police over 100 programs. I mean, I do like the aspect that this almost is like remnants of when free agency and salary caps were in the NFL. Because before, going back to quote unquote NBA and basketball, like we were having this discussion, you only had 5, 6 teams that made it to the finals in the 90s. In the 80s, I think it was only like 7 or 8 teams that would just play each other every year, in the finals. And then college football and college basketball was becoming that same model. And now, obviously, we see this year, now you got the parity. Now, everybody's talking about, Nick Saban and his opinions on it. But you know what? Nick could keep somebody like a Derrick Henry on the bench for 3 years, and Derrick Henry's not going to go anywhere, because if back in the old day, if Derrick Henry goes, he's got to go to Division I AA North Dakota State if he wants to play right away. Or he had to go and go to the NCAA board and try to see, because of extenuating circumstances, and go through all of that stuff. So did I think that was right? So now that's why you see a lot of parity within the SEC. Now that's why you see Big Ten, because now the Big Ten and those other conferences are getting some of those SEC kids that will say, okay, I'm backing up a guy like a Derrick Henry or a Ewers. I don't have to stay here, dude. I mean, my price tag, I can just move on, and then I can go there and I can play. So, it's like I said, man, I just look at it as a double-edged sword. I hope that further regulations, I think that it's going to take time, because once again, man, you're trying to police. I mean, and it sprinkles down. We don't hear it as much, but you're at the Division I AA level, and it sprinkles down at the Division II level, and now it just comes down to how much you're going to pay me on top of that. And unfortunately, man, these 5 stars have leverage, because people don't understand. People throw out the thing of 5 stars, but I was looking at, man, out of all of the high school players in the nation, John, which are thousands, there's only 25 to 30-ish athletes that really get that 5th star every year. So therefore, man, that's a lot of bargaining power when you only have 30-ish, 25 to 30-ish guys that get that 5th star, which is based off of their NFL readiness after 4 years of them making it to the NFL. So right. You know what? That's a lot of bargaining power for a kid that's coming, man, that can make Ohio State spending over $2 million on these kids. And you know what? I'm not saying that they weren't talented or it was good coach, but you know what? National championship, bought and paid for. The year before that, it was Michigan, national championship, bought and paid for, baby. And that's what it's kind of turning into now, and that's why you have the Nick Sabans of the world, through his interviews. I'm not putting words into his mouth, where the landscape has changed. You can't sit on a Tua anymore, because a Tua will sit behind. Back in the day, would sit behind a Jalen Hurts and would have been like, all right, cool. I just sit, I wait my shot, kind of like what Archie did this year over in Texas. So,
yep. But his NIL deal was huge too. So, I mean, he was the most highly paid player. But but you mentioned NFL. Yeah, well, I looked up I saw some data saying he was the highest, but we'll see.
Yeah, he was. That's what I'm saying, man. Dollars make sense. In my great words of Big Worm, before we go into our next segment, Johnny, you know what? Playing with my money is like playing with my emotions.
Yep, exactly. But you mentioned NFL readiness. Now let's get into something that shows NFL readiness after college. So, we talk about the NFL Combine. You look at like players who wow at the Combine, such as like Anthony Richardson's a great example, or like a Cam Newton or anyone like that, or like Xavier Worthy, or Chris Johnson back in the day. Or you're talking about speed, or how many bench press reps, or vertical jump, anything like that. And you're as a longtime college football coach, as my former coach, how much of an indicator is NFL Combine performance for player success?
You know what, John, it's tricky because sometimes, man, it can be a very good indicator, about a player's success, especially depending on the position. And sometimes, man, as a high school football coach, man, you have your workout warriors. You have your guys that can go into the gym, that can put up 500 pounds 6 times on the squat, but once again, that transfer onto the field. And that's what you try to say. I think Louis Riddick said it best over at ESPN, man, and he was like, yes, all that testing and stuff is kind of trying to prove what you already see, but at the end of the day, man, it still comes down to the tape. You still have to evaluate that tape. And the tape combined with what they do at the NFL Combine is really what you're trying to get that mesh and saying, does that have they reached some ceilings in some departments? Do they have the strength? Because I think that if you have questions of their tape, so if they're not playing in the SEC, and let's just say that they're playing in the Mountain West, it does kind of back up with some of these athletes that get under 225 and do 225 35 times, because now that kind of puts you at ease and say, okay, then it wasn't just because he was playing at the Mountain West. This guy has the strength to get it done. So I think when you use those two things in combination with each other, but we've seen super speedsters, man, that in the NFL it just didn't translate, because you know what, you're going
John
against
Ross.
you're going against John Ross. You're going against the speed on the other end, John. I mean, you got other corners that are running 4.25s too. I mean, in college football, man, it is kind of wash where you don't see the best of the best every week. So yeah, your go routes might work in college because you got other guys around you. And that's why I was listening to my boy Todd McShay the other day too. And he was like, that's the thing, like with a Shador, and doing those workouts. And about, when you play for a SEC team, that's why they said that scouts these days don't take a lot of stocks in some tape sometimes of quarterbacks or even running backs, because you have an SEC line. And you have an SEC line going against maybe lower tier guys. So you know what? Bryce Young figured it out. All of the improvisation and everything like that. Yeah, that can work, man, when you got like a 5 out of your 5 linemen, 3 of those jokers are playing in the league right now. So, that really helps. And you're going against a lineman that maybe none of those linemen on the defensive side even got introduced to the NFL draft. They didn't even get a chance to go and perform or anything. Or they're not even in the league right now. These guys are going on and now they have regular jobs. So I think, man, it is a stock when you mesh them together. Because obviously we got the Kurt Warners of the world. We got the Tom Bradys that didn't go out there and give Brock Purdy. That didn't go out there and do a great show. Will Howard, once again, there's people like that. I think the draft really can sink or swim guys like Will Howard, because once again, though, Will Howard, what did you have in front of you? You had probably the best offensive line in college football. So you have
a great group of receivers.
Yeah, you had a great group of receivers. You had one of the best offensive lines. Yeah, 2 great running backs. So once again, John, that comes down to it too, man. That really helps. So that's my take on it. My take on it is that yes, it does matter, and that yes, and see if that you're running this the 40 time and everything like that. But I will. Toss it back to you after this. I was looking at the Kelsey brothers the other day and they were talking about Jerry Rice, and they said, some people were saying that Jerry Rice ran in the 40 from anywhere from like a 4.4 to a 4.7. And Kelsey said, I call foul. He was like, dude, you're not running. He was like, I get it that Jerry Rice was probably one of the best route runners in probably NFL history. Probably one of the best guys that
Probably
can run.
is.
Yeah, probably the best route runner, in my personal opinion, from Mississippi Valley State, may I add, from my hometown state. But, probably is. But he did say that he get it, that 40 times and stuff don't make a difference. But he was like, dude, you're not taking the top off of. He said he wanted to look at those times again because he was like, you're not taking the top off the defense like Jerry Rice did, running no 4.7. Because he was like this, for you to be a good route runner, for all those other routes to work, man, you have to have a go route in your repertoire. Because for people to be afraid of your route running and your skills and finding the holes, they got to be afraid that you're going to take the top off of them. That's why you see some of these other receivers. That's why you see the slot receivers kind of like Devontae over at the Eagles, kind of taking advantage of Brown being the number one receiver over there, because you got to have somebody that can take off the top, to take the top off. And now Devontae, his route running now comes into play. But if you're not able to take off the top, man, these jokers just sit on the underneath route. But no, I digress. And to answer your question, John, I really stick to the fact, man, that there got to be a mesh between tape. And I think that sometimes some people, all you need was tape. And then I think some people, like I said, like a Will Howard, these people that have questions, about arm strength, about timing, about accuracy. Because you know what? I got a big offensive line, man. I can sit back there all day. And I think that that's where the questions come into place, where you have a person like a Josh Allen, and that's why they are giving some pluses to Shedeur that had to create all the time. He didn't have like Alabama line in front of him where he could just sit back there and throw darts. He had to get creative.
Yeah,
same thing like with a Caleb.
Wasn't very good.
Yeah, same thing with a Caleb Williams. So, I mean, what's your thoughts, John?
I mean, honestly, Coach, it's conflicting evidence, really, because you look at some guys who are like physical specimens. I feel like you see it more at certain positions. Like I feel like defensive ends and like linebackers, like certain positions where you need a lot of like explosiveness to make certain plays. I feel like that's where like the measurables can come into play. Like the guys who, you got the guy who's like 270, 280 pounds who's running a 4.7 40. Like when you see that kind of thing, it's more suited for it's more of an indicator for a position like that. I think quarterbacks, I think it can be a little skewed because it's like you see a guy who is like an athletic freak of nature. You think, oh, this is our franchise guy. And I think like Anthony Richardson's a great example of that, or like Cam Newton. Like as great as Cam Newton was, like I've never seen anyone literally dominate a football game individually like he can. At the same time, if you want to talk about him as just a pure quarterback, there were definitely guys who were better than him. If you want to talk about pure quarterback talent, it's just that Cam Newton in his prime was a freak of nature. You couldn't stop anything he did. Mm-hmm. So you look at, and then you also look at, like, I remember I brought up Chris Johnson earlier, how he was, and you mentioned the small school thing. This is another factor with Chris Johnson too. He came from ECU, East Carolina. He didn't get as much time. Like I saw him in a bowl game one time, and he impressed me. He really did. But the thing is, I did not know he was that fast. And all of a sudden at the combine, I hear he runs a 4.24, and he goes from like around a third or fourth round prospect, shoots all the way up to the first round, gets picked by Tennessee. And like I said to you earlier this week when I was talking to you, I don't know, there aren't many better running back seasons I've ever seen than Chris Johnson back in 2009. Like he just dominated the league. And
agreed.
But like you also said, like he had a little too many carries for a guy who wasn't that big. He wasn't built like an Emmitt Smith or Marshall Faulk or LaDainian Tomlinson or something like that. He wasn't built like that. He was a smaller back, so it was harder for him to take that kind of pounding. So. But now that we mentioned like guys who kind of rose up, like let's think of some guys in this year's draft who may be a little, who may be more like under the radar type guys. We know about the Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, and Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, the defensive end. Like, we know about some of these guys, but who are some guys, Coach, that you think could be like in the third or fourth round that could be good players? I kind of think if Quinn Ewers gets in the right system, he might eventually be a starting quarterback for somebody. He's more of a system guy for sure, but he's one of those, like, I guess you could say probably like more unimpressive types when you see him like on paper, or like on the field, or even like on film, or even like at the combine. But I feel like if you get him in the right system, he might be a starter sometime. I don't know if he'll start right away, but he could probably be a starter in time.
You know what, John? It feels weird to me, but I know that some people are going to look at me a little crazy about this, man. But I really think Will Howard. I think when you slide like that, man, you go to a team that already has a defense in place. A la Russell Wilson, a la he was still in the first round, but still a la for the Pack. I know Aaron Rodgers. So, these people slide. Jordan Love, Dak Prescott. These jokers slide, man, but you slide to teams that already have good things in place. And you know what? I like Will Howard, man. I like his arm. I think that maybe the draft I watched that. It was just a big moment for him. And, wasn't his day. But I do think that he has a lot of intangibles that would make him a good quarterback along those lines of a Purdy if you have the right things around him. A really good game manager that can come in. Is he a franchise guy? I don't know, but I really do think that he's a guy, if somebody goes down, that I've heard he's got a great head on his shoulders. He's got a good work ethic. At Ohio State and the things that he faced this year, which was tough for him. So he's one of my guys, man. I think that he's one of the guys that sneak. The name escapes me, John, but it is the left tackle, I believe, for Utah State. I can't think of his name. I mean, he's on the
For him.
Yep, he's on the.
Yeah, I'm calling it up.
Yeah, he's I think it was Utah State, and I just remember them talking about him. And those are the sneaky guys, those offensive linemen, those defensive linemen that you're able to get.
Very much so.
That you're able to get in those later rounds. But like I said, the biggest thing to me was definitely Will Howard was the one that stuck out to me, just based off
He's
of.
He's a winner,
and that's what you can't. You cannot not focus on that. Same thing with Tom Brady.
Right.
Same thing with Dak Prescott. I mean, still in college, man, is that was the intangible. The intangible is that the man still wins games, and it wasn't necessarily because of the talent around him. Same thing with Tom Brady when he was at Michigan. It wasn't because he had killer talent around him. I mean, the guy attitude, and that's why I think when you're speaking to GMs and stuff like that, it is very important that you say that. And then I'm gonna switch here, John, for a minute. That's why I don't like when you see Tom Brady, okay, he's a winner, he's going to get after it. Shador Sanders say it, and now all of a sudden Shador is cocky. And, is he coachable? Mm-hmm. And blah, blah, blah. Like, they don't know who his dad is, man. Do you think that you're going to be raised up in that household and be Mr. Humble Pie? I mean, come on now. I mean, let's be honest with each other. But swinging it back, exactly. swinging it back to you, John. Anybody that you've seen that you think that is, other than the guy that you mentioned, any other than yours, any dark horses you think that might be sneaking up on us?
Well, dark horses gets us right into state school players in the draft. I actually think Hunter Wohler could be a good NFL player. I really do. And the thing about him is, I think the one thing about him though is I'm not sure he could be a safety he might be able to be a safety at the next level, but I'm thinking he might need to bulk up and play linebacker because
good point.
he didn't cover as well this last year with the Badgers. Now that could be a bit of a misnomer because the Badgers were a pretty below average team last year. So Hunter Wohler was basically he basically almost had to do everything on that defense, but he is as sure a tackler as you'll see. I mean,
Yeah, and the
you
scouts
watch him
don't
in the
mean
open field.
don't
Yeah,
mean to interrupt you,
go
John,
ahead, go ahead.
but it's to your point. They said that the scouts do question his top end speed, his stop and go. So you know what? That might translate better at linebacker than it does at
Mhm.
safety, because the scouts said is that before the draft and everything like that, that is one of the things that they question about him.
Right. Yes. No. Absolutely. And I saw it. And I saw it when he played at Wisconsin. He's obviously. I mean, obviously you don't play safety if you're slow. But as far as like somebody at that position, yeah, I think that he could be more like. I mean, I know that I don't feel like I hear this term much anymore. I remember hearing it being under playing under you was the rover. I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's as much of like a rover player anymore. Like at least they don't use that term. But like
Right.
for like he's more of like a safety linebacker type who could like definitely be like a guy who could come on the blitz a lot. You'll bring him up to stop the run. He is somebody who can make plays in the short passing game. Get the tight end who's coming off on the flat or a receiver that's coming on the drag. Like I honestly think that if I honestly think that Wohler, if he could bulk up a little bit and so that he could play safety and linebacker, maybe even translate to being a linebacker, I think he could end up being a starter on a defense. Because like you look at some of these other guys who have gone through Wisconsin, like Zach Bond
Mm-hmm.
or Jack Sanborn. He doesn't play as much, but he's a solid role player linebacker. I was a guy who used to play. Joe Schobert played for the Browns. T.J. Watt's a little different. The Watt brothers are freaks of nature. That's a little different, but
Yeah,
like
genetic freaks, man. They're crazy.
exactly. But you look at like a couple other safeties who played for the Badgers who actually I don't even think were drafted. I think Wohler will be drafted, but a couple guys who didn't even get drafted were back in the day. Jim Leonard, he had a 10-year career in the NFL despite being a 5'9" safety. I mean, he really like talk about somebody who bucked the odds, but he did that his whole career. Like he walked on at Wisconsin and
Oh yeah.
everything. Like he just had that was determination and smarts. I mean, Jim Leonard, you don't find many smarter football players on the field than him. He knew where a play was going before the ball was even snapped. I mean, it was just you already knew I was with him. And also, I don't know if you remember this guy. He played for the Seahawks for a couple of years. Chris Maragos.
Yeah, I
He was a
do.
solid safety for the Badgers. And yeah, and he. I feel like he was more of a special teams guy in the NFL, but I didn't even think when I saw him at Wisconsin, I didn't even think he'd end up in the NFL, and he
Right.
did. So
And there's a place for
that
those
did.
guys, John. I mean, rewinding back to the NFL draft, man, I think that we're just proving our point with all of those guys that you just named is that, you know what, does the draft really come into that importance? Is there a mixture between tape? Is there a mixture between, as they say, John, the best ability in the NFL and in college football is availability. I mean, half of the guys that you named are guys because guys went down in front of them. Guys went down in them in training camp, and they capitalized off of what they were able to do. And then they had a team that was able to fit the things that they do well. And then those qualities came out. Getting drafted, John, is all about market value. See, people don't understand that. It is not about sometimes about how good you are or how not good you are. It's the pretty girl syndrome. Does somebody want me? Just same thing with Shador. Shador will drop because of the pretty girl syndrome. It's like, okay, how many other suitors does Shador have? Because it doesn't mean that he's like bad, but if the New York Giants says, hey, look here, there's not enough people that are in the Shador sweepstakes for us to worry about. So he will fall to the second round and he'll still be there and we'll give him for a second round pick and we ain't got to get him first round money. See, people think it's because you drop, it's because you're not that good. It just means is that, come on, Aaron Rodgers, man, probably one of the most pure passers and first ballot Hall of Famer of all times. It was between
Probably the best,
him.
probably the best example ever.
Yeah, between him and Smith. So Smith went number one. And then they were like in it, but there was just not 20 other teams that was interested in a quarterback at that time. Either they already had a quarterback or they had somebody that they were getting in free agency. And it wasn't that they did not like Aaron Rodgers. It's just that, you know what? We're not spending money. I think then that was back in the age where running backs were really big, where edge rushers would go in the first round. So it was a little bit different back then. And so he slides to 24. Does that mean that he's not good? No. It's about suitors, man. And it's about the pretty girl syndrome. You know what? How many guys are standing in line for the pretty girl? And if it's only one and they figure that, hey, I can get you in the fourth, you'll still be hanging around in the third, then these guys and these GMs make business decisions and say, heck, we can pass on him in the first round, get an immediate need, and then he'll be there later on for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, and then you look at and we talked about like state players. You only got this year's kind of thin on state players. You know, you don't really see. I don't know if any of the guys from the other schools have. None of them are at the combine. You only got a couple linemen. That's always a big thing from Wisconsin. You guys got a couple linemen. So
shameful. Wisconsin. I remember, man, really, where you would have like 5 and 6 linemen in a line from Wisconsin. You know, losing the mystique of the running backs, of the offensive linemen,
D linemen.
I mean, you know, coming from the state, man, you know, usually I know the name of the offensive lineman, the Zach Martins of the world. I mean, you just go through the list of awesome linemen, man, that came from the Big Ten as a whole, but especially Wisconsin. If you were a lineman and you were worth a salt in the state of Wisconsin, you are not escaping, John. So it's very surprising that we have very few prospects this year coming out of Wisconsin. You know, the safety doesn't surprise me because usually, you know, we get defense. I mean, we don't have a defensive lineman this year. Usually, man, there's always a dark horse defensive lineman or a linebacker. We usually always have linebackers that come from the University of Wisconsin. So that is interesting. But, John, let's thing that's close to my heart, and I didn't really know this when I first moved up here because I was an Atlanta Braves fan, man. What? How's it going to be, man? How's it going to be this year without the Uecker, man? And you know what? I was introduced to him, John, when with Major League was when I was introduced to him.
Oh yeah,
and I didn't know he meant so much in Wisconsin. I didn't know how much he meant in Wisconsin until I watched that movie. So I didn't even put 2 and 2 together, man. I thought he was just a paid actor. Like, I wasn't into baseball that big, like, back then, so I thought he was just a paid actor and whatever, whatnot. And I didn't know that he was, like, the Brewer announcer. And just so many quotes from that movie, man. And you know, he is, like, the master of what you say, John, when you play yourself, then it just seems natural. And that was Uecker all day, man. I mean, in that movie, he just basically played himself. I mean, he played a slightly exaggerated version of himself, and it just went into it, man. But so, what is your thoughts, man? I was so heartbroken because it's just he's a national. He's like a Mount Rushmore member, man. That I felt like that kind of took the hearts, because that's what I would do during the springtime, man. I would turn that radio on. I remember when I first moved up here, I would turn that radio on. I would just clean the house. I don't even watch the games. I wouldn't even halfway watch the games because I found his ability to announce the games way more entertaining than anything else that I could watch on TV. So I would just like turn them on my radio and listen, man. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, I mean, first I'm just going to get to, you said Mount Rushmore. The minute that happened, I said that Bob Uecker is there's a Mount Rushmore of baseball announcers. But TV, radio, doesn't matter what form you're talking about. You got Bob Uecker from the Brewers, Harry Carey from the Cubs, Vin Scully from the Dodgers, and then Jack Buck, who I don't know if he was just with a specific team or if he was just a TV guy who did all the national broadcasts. I can't remember. He's Joe Buck's dad. So Jack Buck's Joe Buck's dad. But so those 4 guys, Jack Buck, Vin Scully, Harry Carey, Bob Uecker, that is the Mount Rushmore baseball announcers. I mean, and you mentioned like listening to the games on the radio, like how, like, my dad and I, that was all we did. Like throughout the summer, throughout spring, summer, fall, like, even though we always had cable growing up, sometimes we would just listen to the game. We had Fox, but we could watch them on Fox Sports Wisconsin. But we would listen to the game on the radio just to hear Bob Uecker's voice. And the thing was with Uecker also, you knew that he had high standards for who worked with him because they always had a good announcer with him in the booth, which I think he definitely would have had something to do with that because he wasn't going to tolerate somebody in the booth who didn't know what he was doing. So he trained, like you could tell that he trained so many guys to become better, to become announcers, not just in baseball. Like I see guys who've worked with him, who worked with Uecker, who are announcing basketball games now.
Right.
Like it's the thing, but the thing is just hearing Uecker's legendary voice growing up and listening to games on the radio, it is gonna feel different, even though, I mean, he's 90 years old. Talk about, I mean, if there's anybody who has a life well lived, it was Bob Uecker.
No.
Bob Uecker is the ultimate life, and he did it until he passed. Like his availability was more limited over the years as he got older. He had more health problems. Like he didn't travel with the team as much. Like they had like a couple other guys who would go on the road, but at home he was still his same self. Like you remember Jackson Trio played for the Brewers last year. This is a 20-year-old rookie last year, and Uecker's calling his home runs the same way he called Gorman Thomas's home runs back in the day.
Yeah.
Robin Yount's big hits back in the day. It's just he never changed, no matter how he never changed. He always brought that energy. And you mentioned Major League, man. I could go all day reciting quotes from that movie, man. Just the legendary sound bites he had from that movie. It was just Bob Uecker is a legend. No, it's gonna feel absolutely crazy. Bittersweet, man. But
no, absolutely.
You talk
great.
about life well lived, man.
Hey, John. It's that. I think we got about a couple of minutes. Then we're gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna shorten my rant up a little bit, but it's that time. I can hear that bell.
I think it is. I think it is, Coach.
I can hear it.
It's time for.
Go ahead.
It is time for Johnny Talks and Smitty, rants.
That's fair.
So let's get it. Yeah. So let's get into my talk as a Wisconsin Badgers fan, and our first two podcasts have been right after the Wisconsin basketball team has blown a sizable lead in a game. So I want to get into blown leads and just like the increased frequency of them. This is mostly going to be obviously this can apply to all sports, but this is mainly going to be a basketball thing for me because you see it so much in basketball nowadays. Like a team is never out of a game, even if they're down. I saw the Bucks one time blow a 20-point lead in 4 minutes. So it's like you're never out of a game these days. But I want to talk specifically about blown leads using the two examples of Wisconsin basketball this year. Let's first talk about the psychological impact going forward in a season. You blow a big lead, especially late in a game, such as they did against Oregon a couple weeks ago. You're up 15 points with about 7 minutes to go. You blow that lead, it goes to overtime. Oregon eventually wins the game on your home floor. This was in Madison where this happened. And these types of things, like they can have a lasting effect on a team's psyche. They really can, because it's like you've got the lead. You just feel like you got the game. You're playing well coming into it. And then everything just it almost like feels like comes crashing down in that moment. And it takes a lot of mental resolve that a lot of players and coaches, they don't have it. It's really, those kind of games can really turn a season around just based on the psychological impact of having a game in your hands like that and snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. But the other thing is about that, and I think this might be the bigger aspect. I just thought about this year. When you blow a lead, in the time that happens, so so the example I'm using, Wisconsin versus Oregon, it was about a 12 and a half minute stretch. You talk about last 7.5 minutes of regulation, 5 minutes of overtime. All of your weaknesses as a team are shown right there. Like all of your weaknesses as a team are shown right there. The holes in your defense, the how to stop your scores from going off on you. Like I say, this is basketball example. We could go all day, like football, even baseball, hockey, whatever. All of your team's weaknesses are shown. You have given your future opponents all the game film they need to know how to break you down. When you blow a big lead in a game, you have given your opponents the blueprint on how to beat you.
Agreed.
That is the big that is the big thing. All a team has to do, like, they can sit there study game film all day. You blow a big lead in a game, they got to do is watch that clip. Okay, see, and like obviously you can look at what the other team did. The other team just, like, Oregon just got real hot. That happens too, but honestly, all the game film a team needs to find your weaknesses are right there. So that's my talk for the day. Blown leads, there's just so much behind it and how it impacts a team. And like I say, it's a psychological impact, but more importantly, teams just have the blueprint on how to beat you.
Well, good talk, John, because now I'm going to go into something that we've been seeing a little bit lately. And I'm not the person to usually go into things that are happening on social media and what an athlete says, or, you know what, I wouldn't want somebody coming into my house after I leave work to try to figure out what's going on in my personal life. So I'm going to say this as a coach. I used to say this way back when. My rant is about, let's just keep sports. I understand a lot of people will say, hey, you know what? There's been some really awesome athletes that have spoken on things like civil rights. And then the things that happened in the Olympics back in the 60s when we rose the hand up and that brought awareness. I understand and I get it. That is not what I'm attacking here or discussing on my rant. My thing is that we need to understand is that these athletes are human beings. They have good things about them. They have bad things about them. I would hate for somebody to peel back some of the bad decisions that I've made in life, which has nothing to do with me being a good coach, a good man, and a person that can stand up in front as an educator. Like that, and like I said, and people work on different things. I just don't like when we attack athletes for things that are behind closed doors, or even athletes getting into things. I understand that if it's, like the kicker from KC that was at a thing last year. He was speaking on marriage last year. That's a paid thing. That is what he did on his time. I totally understand that. That is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, hey, look here, let's give some of these athletes a break. I always said as a coach that I would tell my athletes is that all of the racism, all of the backbiting, all of the stuff that happened in the world, when you walk on that football field, man, you are free. It's like a bubble. And you go into that bubble, and that bubble allows you to be free of those things and to enjoy the game that we love with your brotherhood, to enjoy the things that are happening on the field. You can forget about your girlfriend, you can forget about drama at home, and especially, John, at Riverside, being in that type of inner city school environment, man, that was very important to us. We had a lot of people on our team that were going through a lot of things that we couldn't even imagine that they were going on. So I'm going to bring that to light.
Right.
I mean, come on now. Sports is supposed to be that safe haven. I don't go and watch sports like I do, like I'm going to go and watch the Maury Povich show. If I want to go and find out who the father or who not the father is, John, I don't go and watch the KC versus San Francisco game. I'm just saying, man, I don't want to know all of that. I don't go and watch TMZ. If I want to go and figure out all of this crazy stuff, I'll go just watch TMC. I'm not watching this.
Is Anthony Edwards raising his kid?
Right. I'm not. You know what? Dude, the guy just dropped 25. or he cost me a parlay. I mean, I'll deal with that. But no, that's my rant. I'm ending it there, man. I just think that let's just keep sports. I understand that if you have other things, or if LeBron James is speaking at an event and everything like that. But you know what? Sports are sacred, and I just think that I've seen over the last couple of years, and especially in these last weeks, that you know, people personal life, people personal decisions are spilling into the sports that I love. And, it is not one of those things for me, for people in the comment section. It's not one of those things for me is saying, shut up and play. That is not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is value the game for what it is. Go on the court, take care of your business. You know what? We should give you some leniency, is that you are still a person in life. I know that you signed up for being this over superstar athlete, but you've also signed up for the empathy for us to be and to treat you like a person and to give you that same mutual respect that I have when I go home and I shut the lights off, John. When you go home from your job, we have that where you know what it can be there. So I just say, to end my rant, keep sports. R.I.P. Mr. Uecker, and you have brought some joys to my life. I wanted to end on that. You brought some joys to me and made me proud when I moved up here to be Milwaukee. And in the great words from that movie, who cares? Ain't nobody listening anyway.
Yep. And my tribute to you, Mr. Uecker, is, I mean, you are just one of many things that really bonded me and my dad over the years. And we'll listen to baseball games and go into the games, and uh, wish I could have met you in person. You always seem like a pretty down to earth guy, but now you meet my dad up, my mom, my dad up there. So
Agreed, sir.
love you, Bob. Love you, Bob. Not gonna be the same without you, man. But you left the legacy.
All right.
And with that being said, this has been Smack Talk with Smitty and Johnny.
Godspeed. You're the king of deeds, John. The king of deeds, my friend. All right, guys. Coach. All right, man. Same here. Right. Have a good one. Signing off.
All right.
Consider yourself entertained. Please make sure that you like, share, and follow.